Welcome back. These are the 5 points a day for a change. Instead of questions, we'll talk about 5 points a day to ace PMP 2021 exams. This is volume 26. All right. These 5 notes are taken from a book which has become quite popular in Amazon, and this is called Ninja Notes for PMP exams. These Ninja Notes are targeted for PMP 2021 and they're across all Amazon sites. Now, they're both in paperback and Kindle versions. Now, in India and few other Asian countries, it's only Kindle version. But in Japan, Europe, and US, particularly Canada, they are available in paperback, and even the paperback version is completely all color, which makes it quite interesting, but at the same time, it is packed to the brim with all kinds of notes which are needed for you to not only pass PMP exams 2021, but ace it. All right, let's have a look at least 5 of them. There are point number 1, stages of conflict. Now, these days, they have started asking questions on stages of conflict, not just about conflict, but stages of conflict. In fact, all the 5 points today, we'll be talking about conflicts. So this is dedicated to conflicts. Quite a few questions come in the PMP exams connected to conflict, and because of the lack of understanding by many of the candidates who appear for PMP exam, they get the questions wrong. Not anymore once you go through this. All right. Stages of conflict is basically there to understand that, listen, the earlier we can get rid of a conflict, the better it is. Because once the conflict has become in a manifested stage or it has become very prominent, even if you solve it, even if you resolve it, a lot of bad taste remains. So that's the whole purpose of stages of conflict. A good leader, a good manager should be a very observant person and should be able to resolve the conflict as early in the life cycle of that conflict. The life cycle of that conflict or a specific conflict is marked by the stages of conflict. At the very beginning, you have the latent stage. This stage of conflict is, let's say, you've just handed over, you're working uh, in a hotel, and you handed out 2 keys, and both the keys belong to the same room. Now, both the guests who are walking towards the room are not aware that there's a conflict. The conflict would occur once they reach the room and they both try to enter the same room. That's when the conflict would happen. But that stage has not reached yet. But because of the surrounding circumstances, you have observed that this is a latent conflict. Participants are not yet aware of that conflict. And therefore, the moment you come to know of it, you just reach out to one of the persons, one of the guests, and simply say, hey, sir, I think I made a mistake and gave you a different key. Let me correct my mistake by offering you a different key. And therefore, you have removed a conflict even before it could actually begin. Even in working environments, there are a lot of situations which a leader could see that would lead to a conflict. But the participants to the conflict may not be aware of it. And therefore, when they're aware of such a situation, get rid of it as soon as you can. And that would make sure that the conflict has not even occurred. Forget about even at an early stage. So that's called the latent stage. But let's say you missed it. It's not possible for leaders and managers to, observe everything all the time. So now what happens is that the conflict has now reached a perceived stage. Both the participants are aware that a conflict exists. They have not really started arguing with each other, but they know that a conflict exists. This knowledge is already giving them a little bit of, apprehension that yes, there is a conflict. Now, even at the perceived level, if we are resolving a conflict, well, there is no problem. The next stage, if you miss this, the next stage is a felt conflict. Now, this is a stage where you have started, the participants to the conflict have started feeling that there is stress and anxiety, and they're about to get into a verbal spat or some kind of a manifestation. So this is the felt stage. Now, even here, a little bit of a damage has already been done. But even here, when you solve it, at least it has not reached a stage where the participants have manifested their displeasure. The conflict has not escalated to an extent. And therefore, even at this stage, if you try to resolve it, things are still better. But once you reach the stage of manifest, over here, already conflict has taken shape in open, and therefore you may resolve it. It is now apparent in the behavior of the people, and even if you resolve it at this stage, it's still a dangerous thing to do. I mean, it's still okay. I mean, you have to resolve it, but you will always find that there'll be a little bit of a bad taste left after that. You'll never be able to completely resolve it because now it has been behaviorally represented. And therefore, the earlier you're able to resolve a conflict, the better. But even after this stage, if you don't resolve even after or at the manifest stage, then you have a conflict aftermath. That means that conflict happened, and then there is a bad taste, and there is a lot of problems between the conflicting parties for a very long period of time. And therefore, this is best represented in the stages of conflict. Point is, the earlier that you resolve it, the better it is. Now, also remember, the reason I spoke so much about each of the stages is so that in PMP exam, when you get a scenario, sometimes they'll actually just tell a scenario, and then you'll have to figure out, okay, which stage of conflict they are in, because that's the question, that's the kind of question they sometimes ask, right? So that's the reason I spend so much time. All right, having done that, let's move on to point number 2. Now, there are various methods of conflict resolution. We've talked about the stages of conflict, but when you try to resolve it, there are some resolution techniques. The one which is called the best, it's called collaboration. It's also called confronting. This word confronting is not being used as much, but even if it does, you know exactly what it means. More popular is collaboration and problem solving. Basically, what it means is when you see a scenario question, right, and they talk about resolving a conflict, make sure that in collaboration, all the parties to the conflict are brought in together, face to face with the arbitrator or with the person who's trying to resolve the conflict. So the project manager, anybody who's trying to resolve a conflict, and a leader has to ensure that all the parties to the conflict are brought in together. That means all of us will sit in front of us, each other, face to face, find the reason why this is happening, reason with it, negotiate, and get our way out. In fact, that's the reason why it is also called the win-win. Now, I really love this kind of a way of representation where your resolution could be dependent on assertiveness, your assertiveness to get your way, and the amount of cooperativeness that you would like to look at the other party. So cooperativeness and assertiveness. This concept of collaboration or confronting is at the extreme corner. It's the best thing to do because it's the height of assertiveness and it's a height of cooperativeness. That's why it's called win-win. That is something that you do in negotiations. It's assertive as well as cooperative, and therefore it is a win-win. Now, I'll be telling you very honestly, I've seen some videos in Udemy. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos, and I was shocked that many of them, in fact, most of them, they actually use win-win with compromise rather than with collaborate, which is horrendous because in compromise, it's just the opposite. I'm going to talk about it in the very next point. So here, whenever there is a scene, wherever there is a scenario that all the parties are being brought together, well, that's collaboration or problem solving or confronting. Or if you're asked that, hey, which is the best method to resolve a conflict, get all the parties together. That's your answer because that's the meaning of the term collaboration, confronting, problem solving. The effectiveness of collaboration is the longest, but it takes a lot of time. All right, having said that, let's move on to point number 3, compromise. Now, this is quite popular. And as I said, many of the people, many of the trainers have actually attributed it wrongly. Compromise is lose-lose. Please remember, compromise is lose-lose. Both the parties to the conflict have to take a step forward. They have to give up something. For example, there's a vendor and vendor and the procurement head are having a major conflict because the vendor is saying, hey, I'm not getting my payments and in time, and the procurement head is saying, hey, they never deliver in time. So this has come to a block. What you could do is you could compromise. You could simply say, "Hey, the vendor guys, do not pose. Not the vendor guy. Let's the procurement head. We request the procurement head, hey, why don't you take a step forward and do not charge any penalty. At the same time, you go to the vendor and you ask them to give something extra in terms of deliverables, right? So that you make up for the loss. So both of them have to give some kind of a step forward. That means they have to lose something from their side, either lose the position, lose an attitude, or actually monetarily lose something so that they can actually come forward and continue with the discussion. This is called lose-lose. And very surprisingly, a phenomenal number of trainers have called this win-win. So please don't fall for that. Compromise is right here. It's like midway of assertiveness and midway of cooperativeness, right? It's lose-lose, not win-win. All right. Now, when we move to the point number 4, there is another method which is called smooth or accommodate. Basically, when you have a conflict, one of the persons just acts a little more grown up than the other and says, hey, it's okay. So smooth and accommodate is mostly like that. This is what you do with your children. If you have 2 kids, right, you actually ask the older kid to accommodate or to smooth the situation. Hey, just make it up. Or you adjust based on the other person's attitude. That fellow is a young kid. So that's called smooth or accommodate. You ask one of the parties to take the higher moral standing or to just give up some part of their right. And that is called smoothing or accommodating. But make sure this is not done again and again with the same party, because then it'll amount or tantamount to something like manipulation. So the person would feel stepmotherly treatment is being meted out to that person. So you have to do it with a pinch of salt, very carefully. Now, when it comes to this grid of assertiveness and cooperativeness, you find immense amount of cooperativeness, but no assertiveness, because one of the parties is simply smoothing or accommodating to the other party. It's called yielding, right? So it is extremely cooperative, no assertiveness of yourself. All right, so another method is called force or direct. That means I force my way as a person, as a leader. I simply say, hey, man, my way or the highway. This is what I'm telling you. I don't want to listen to this conflict. This is what you need to do. Get it done. But it could also be direct that, hey, let me tell you what needs to be done. So let's all get together. Let's not focus too much on the conflict. Now, in both these cases, it's height of assertiveness, leader's assertiveness, but no cooperativeness. Sometimes it is needed. There's nothing known as good or bad. Towards the end of the project, people are having a conflict. The conflict is not even important. It's not happening among important people connected to the project. So you simply force your way through it. There's nothing wrong with it. You see, what you need to understand, you have to use the right conflict resolution technique based on the situation. Now, the last one, I'm sorry, I've gone beyond the 5 points, but good for you. The 6th one is avoiding or withdrawal. Now, even avoiding is sometimes necessary. If there's a lot of problems going on which can't be resolved at this point of time, it does not affect your project directly, you can simply withdraw or you simply avoid it. Now, in PMP, however, there's a question associated with this. If they don't give you a scenario and they simply say, hey, which is the worst method of conflict resolution, then, only then, the answer is avoiding or withdrawal. Right? Avoiding or withdrawal simply means that you do not get involved in the conflict resolution at all. You just let the status quo be and walk out. That is called avoiding or withdrawal. And this is basically neither assertive nor cooperative. It is nothing. Now, if I put it all together, the effectiveness of all these techniques that we talked about can be shown best with these basic arrows. This arrow talks about longevity. How effective is the resolution technique? Right? So if it is collaborative, it is the best. And if it's withdrawing and avoiding, it is the worst, right? Everything in between is like this, from best to slightly lesser, better, slightly less, this is the worst. But this arrow shows how much time does it take to resolve a conflict. So if you go for collaborate or problem solving, you actually end up spending a lot of time. But withdrawing and avoiding does not take any time whatsoever, and everything in between. This is putting everything together. Now, I'm pretty sure after this particular video, you would not have any problem with any of the questions when it comes to conflict resolution. Well, that's what PM Pulse does, right? Our philosophy is to make sure that you understand the subject. Rest of the trainers, they simply want you to mug up something, somehow get through, may or may not. So that is something that we don't believe in. We want you to be practically effective, and then exam becomes just a side effect. Anyway, thanks you for watching, and we do go ahead and subscribe. Don't miss out, because there'll be one video every single day till 30th of December. Yes, true. Yeah, I know it's hard work, but it's all for you guys. It's all free. That's the best part. And just make sure that you have pressed the notification button so that you get notifications for every new content that is pasted every single day. Comment so that I can interact with you, and please leave a thumbs up mark. It does wonders with the algorithm so that it can reach more people, and share, because in PM Pulse we do not have the philosophy of investing in paid promotions, so we depend on people like you to promote it. Thank you for watching. Best luck for your PMP exams.